Good. Good afternoon, welcome. I'm Michael Kurisu. I'm going to be moderating this panel here. And I am an osteopathic family physician, as well as the director for Center for Integrative Medicine at UC San Diego. I have extra expertise in integrative and holistic medicine, as well as a becoming expertise in this new field of data science, medicine, and precision health. I've been kind of dragged into that whether I like it or not. I wonder if we could go around with introductions here really quickly.
I'm Sharon Morris. I'm the Senior Director of Programs for FiRe for Strategic New Service, and I'm CEO of FiReFilms, but mostly right now, I'm a patient.
I'm Mary Beckerle. I'm a scientist and a cancer researcher. I'm also the Chief Executive Officer of Huntsman Cancer Institute, which is a cancer specialty hospital and large cancer research institute at the University of Utah.
I'm Larry Smarr. I'm Professor of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of California, San Diego, Founding Director of Cal IT2, and somewhere between a patient and a researcher on the patient.
And I'm going to give a little background story that'll set the stage for this panel here. About 3 years ago, Larry came limping into my clinic, and my life hasn't been the same since. From both a professional standpoint, and we'll kind of get into that, but also a personal standpoint. I've gotten to know Larry personally, and as with all my patients, I lean in heavily, and it's been a really pleasure to work in this, and he and I have been collaborating on a lot of different types of projects. You know, he's the only patient that I know that showed up with 2 terabytes of data, 6 PowerPoint presentations, and a couple of TED Talks for me to watch before I even saw him. And so that begged the question is, what do I do with all of this data that's coming into me as a regular, kind of primary care doctor? And it's been a fun collaboration. Larry has dragged me to technology conferences like this, and I've dragged him to medical conferences. As a patient, he has given grand rounds for surgery at UC San Diego, and that's never happened. A year and a half ago, we did a keynote lecture at a medical conference as a doctor and patient on stage, and they'd never had a patient on stage. So this relationship has been kind of a very interesting one for me. It's been a really interesting journey. And about a year, 2 years ago, Larry told me, he's like, it can't be just this hobby of you and I. Like, how do we expand this out to more people? How do we get more patients involved in this? And so I put the call out to the patients that I know that have had a lot of data about themselves. Either there were these quantified self-tracker type patients, or there are people who are undiagnosed, like we saw last night, who have a lot of data, or misdiagnosed and they bounced around. They have the medical chart that's 36 inches thick. And so I kind of created this, after I got that idea at this conference last year, and I put the call out to my patients, and I created this patient data support group kind of thing, and got about 10, 11 patients in the room last November. And it was kind of magical about what happened there, because there was a common theme that came out from everyone's stories. And the most common theme was everyone was really frustrated with what the current medical system has been doing to them, because it's a broken system. It's not a healthcare system. We have a disease care system, and they've felt that they've been failed by this system. And this most common unifying thread was that they had all this data about themselves, and they wanted to feel empowered to do something about it. So I wanted to create a safe space for that to happen. And originally, this small group of patients kind of nicknamed themselves the Little Larrys, because they wanted to kind of be like him. I don't know if that's a good thing or not from a medical and psychological standpoint. But that had a good ring to it, but then we decided on the name Project Apollo, because we wanted to stick with the theme of space, exploring space, and Larry's like the first astronaut up there, like the cosmonaut actually, but one of Larry's sons corrected me that Larry's more like that monkey Albert that first went into space to experiment on. And this next cohort of patients is the next set, and that's what we called ourselves Project Apollo. And it was here at FiRe a year ago when I was on stage with Larry and we were in a panel. And then afterwards, Larry's like, I want to introduce you to somebody. And it's Sharon Morris. And most of you know her in this room, and she's a big, bright, shining light. And one of the reasons that FiRe happens. And when I met her a year ago, it seemed that that light was starting to dim a little bit. And instead of me explaining it to you all, I think I'll let Sharon explain her story.
This is very odd for me to explain my story, but I feel like we have so many friends in this room that I feel the love from you, so it's okay. In 2004, I was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, and I did not smoke. My brother and I were on a plane going to London after 6 months of a sore throat and misdiagnostics, saying everything from you have an ear infection to it's in your head. And then that altitude, Mark and I went to London, and I realized I had a real problem. And I said, Mark, I don't know what to do. I'm really sick. And because of our network here, because of my brother, I had the advantage, which most people don't, of being able to connect with somebody for help. And so I called Lee Hartwell, the cancer Nobelist of the Hutch Center. And I said, Lee, I know I have cancer. I've been misdiagnosed. I've had biopsies that turn out fine, and I'm in trouble. And in 2 days, I was at MD Anderson, and in 4 hours, I was diagnosed and given a very, very strict regimen of chemotherapy and radiation. And I took that prescription back home to we lived in Charlotte, and brought that to my radiologist and oncologist, and they said, they were from MD Anderson. They said that this will kill you. We're not going to do it. And I said, yes, you are. And they were not used to hearing a patient stand up for herself or himself. And they said, we're not going to take the responsibility. You will die if we do this to you. And I said, I want to do this. I want to give it my all. I don't want it to have a recurrence, and wish that I would have done it the way that it was supposed to be done the first time. So the treatment actually did kill me. I flatlined. I was in intensive care. And I lived. I survived. My husband laid on the bed with me, and he said, in our hospital bed, he said, please promise me you won't die after this had happened. And I had to think really, really hard, and I had to get all the energy within me to think, is that the right thing? Can I promise that? And I could. And I said, I will not die. I'll be here for you. And we went through the treatment, and after that, the hospital, I looked really good. It was really amazing for all I had been through. I mean, I still had some hair, and I did the best with it. Girls know how to do stuff with fake hair and stuff. And so they wanted me to be this like poster child of like the success story of the woman who should have died. And so they said, do you mind if we like even put your face on the bus? You know, Sharon survived. And put it in the papers and interviews and do radio interviews and TV interviews. And I said, I will do all of that for you if I can sit with your team for an hour and a half, all the doctors in oncology and radiology, and talk with you about my experience that I've had over the last 6 months with you, so that you can know what went wrong and what went right. And they said, okay, hesitantly, and signed a thing. And I went through all the errors that had happened to me, that I knew as a patient were going through this, that should not have been done to me. Whether it's putting a stent right here when you're bending your elbow, from the feeding tube that I had in the wrong place, I knew when something was being done that was wrong, and I questioned it, and they told me to be quiet. So I told them what I learned, and I was very angry, but at the same time, very grateful. They didn't know, they didn't have a clue. They were really, really interested. They had no experience whatsoever in my kind of cancer. They just treated patients, and then they went away, and most of them died, and some of them didn't. So from there, and my second request was, I want to start a mentorship program, because I had no one to talk to. If I would have been able to talk to somebody about some of the things that were happening to me, I would have been able to have the knowledge to say, I don't want you to do that to me. I want to do it this way. And so part of the agreement was what I said, I'll set up a mentorship program at the hospital for all head and neck cancer patients, to have 3 people to call at all times. And that was, I think, one of the best things I've ever done in my life. I was... It wasn't anything good about me. It was my responsibility. I was given my challenge so that I could teach others how to do something from my lessons. So 2 of the patients died that I had of 3, but I walked through it with them. I'd already been there in my own mind, and they had a beautiful ending. And I was with their families by phone. I've never personally met any of those. And the one survivor, Martha, I've still not met yet, but we talk to each other every month. And And it was a beautiful thing. So I got better, I healed, and things were great, and I was traveling again, and I was back traveling to see my brother, and then 12 years later, last year, things started happening. I couldn't eat. I had a really difficult time eating. I got sick a lot. I had pneumonia twice in 6 months. I lost 10 pounds, and I didn't know what was happening to me. So I went to doctors in Salt Lake City, and I said, I can't swallow. I don't know what's happening to me. And so they said, oh, we're going to have to put a feeding tube in you. And I said, no. And I went to 5 doctors, and they all said the same thing. Oh, sorry, we have nothing that we can do for you. I called Martha. I was the mentor of Martha. I called Martha. I said, Martha, I've got a problem. And she said, what is it? I told her, and she said, oh, you need to have a dilation of your esophagus, Sharon. Easy. She taught me. She taught me how to survive. So I found a doctor who's associated with Huntsman Cancer Institute, Dr. Feng. I love him. And he gives me dilations every 3 or 4 months. And I gained my weight back, and I became healthy again. And the problem that I had with the chemotherapy, the radiation after 12 years can kick back in, you guys. Okay, so nobody knows this. Anybody who has radiation anywhere, look for signals of radiation changes in your body. That's really critical to know. And that's what happened to me. The other part of it is chemotherapy. I have no immune system. And I was very sick, and I used my connection. I said, Mark, what should I do? I'm sick all the time, and he didn't know what to do. He was worried to death about me. And so I said, I'll call Larry. Larry's been studying everybody's body and his own for the whole world for such a long time. And I called Larry, and I said, Larry, I'm in trouble. Can you help me? And Larry helped me. And Larry introduced me to Michael. And I met Michael the day of FiRe last year, and he did an analysis on my body, and he told me more by feeling my body than I had known in the last year from CT scans, MRIs, and various doctors. And Michael and Larry and my brother and my team that I talked to you about, including Martha, have saved my life, and that's my story.
Thank you, Sharon. It takes a lot of courage telling your story, especially on a stage like this, so I really applaud you and your courage for doing this.
Thank you.
Especially with a diagnosis of cancer, and it's a great segue to lead into you, Mary, about the CEO of Huntsman Cancer Institute, and what are the things that we're looking for in the future? What are we doing now as far as technology, precision health and cancer, this patient-centered data? What can you tell us?
Yeah, I think I want to convey, for Sharon, thank you so much for sharing your story. 1 in 2 men, and 1 in 3 women will get a cancer diagnosis at some point in their lifetime. So this remains a major, major global health challenge. I believe that there are, and I want to focus on kind of 4 main areas that are sort of big trends in cancer research and care right now that I think guide us into the future to improve outcomes for cancer patients and their families. And I'm going to help you remember them by calling them the 4 Ps. First is precision. Second is prevention. Third is patient-centered. And 4th is partnering. Thank you. 4th is partnering. So let's take them one at a time. First of all, precision. We are in the middle of a revolution in cancer research and care right now. From ancient times until about 20 years ago, we had 3 main strategies for treating cancer: surgery, radiation therapy, chemotherapy. From ancient times till 25 years ago. In the last 25 years, we have 2 new major pillars: targeted molecular therapy and immunotherapy. And these 2 together have ushered in the era that we call precision medicine. This is huge for patients. It means that we look at the patient's tumor in molecular detail, in genetic detail, and we target that tumor with a very, very precise therapy that is matched to that individual person's tumor. This reduces side effects, it improves outcomes, and it also helps us to not give treatments to patients that are never going to benefit from them because they don't have the right genetic makeup. This is very, very exciting, but you need to know that if you look at all patients and all tumors, only about 35 to 40% of patients' tumors match to what we call an actionable therapy. That is, there are only 35 to 40% that actually the tumor biology matches to a known therapeutic intervention. So we need to do a lot more research to expand that repertoire. Second is prevention. We in the cancer community have spent a lot of time focusing on therapy and treatment. We need to continue to do that because we're responding to patients who come in need of better, more effective therapies. But we also need to take a lesson from the cardiovascular field, I believe, and focus on prevention. In the last couple of decades, we've seen a dramatic decline in deaths from cardiovascular disease. I can assure you that's not because we now know how to treat late-stage heart failure. It is because we have identified pre-disease conditions, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and we treat those pre-disease conditions. We in the cancer community need to think about that as a model for cancer prevention as well. We can estimate right now that something like 40 to 50% of all cancers could be prevented if people employed all of the best practices known scientifically to reduce their risk. These include things that I'm sure you're all aware of, like avoiding tobacco products, being careful in exposure to the sun, eating lots of fruits and vegetables, maintaining a healthy weight. These scientific discoveries and this knowledge base, though, doesn't do us any good if it sits in medical journals and somewhere in the cloud. It needs to be disseminated to the communities where it's needed. We need to have better strategies for implementation of these best practices to reduce risk. Third is patient-centered. I think we've heard already how important that is. In the cancer community, we think a lot about the tumor. We need to think more about the whole patient, and not just the patient's physiology, but the patient's environment, their community, their educational basis, their socioeconomic status, all kinds of factors. Just let me give you one example of something that we've learned recently, which I think is amazing. We've done this big experiment at Huntsman Cancer Institute with a lot of our advanced stage cancer patients and worked with Flatiron Health. We've collected patient-reported outcomes from these patients over a period of time, looking at things like depression, anxiety, physical fitness, how well they're sleeping, how well they're eating, et cetera. And we have been able to match that to their electronic health record and have determined that just the patient-reported outcomes, independent of anything else we know about that patient from their medical record, is a high-fidelity way of predicting 12-month survival and hospital-free 12-month survival, which is just amazing. So we have a wealth of information that patients can share with us that will predict their health and will help us to guide their treatment. And the final is partnership. We've already heard a lot from Sharon about partnership. And I think that just like we think in our scientific fields, that we really need to bring people together from diverse disciplines with diverse perspectives and collaborate to make things really happen when we're trying to tackle complex challenges. Same thing in cancer research and in cancer care. And the way of the future in cancer is going to be through partnerships. We have a lot of asymmetry in our relationships, doctor-patient relationships, patient-researcher relationships. We need to have much more symmetry, and we're getting this in our patient-physician relationships because patients are coming with information, and our physicians are being more and more open to receiving that information and really working in partnership with the patient to improve their health. And likewise, the patient-researcher relationship, it's no longer the case where the researcher provides the sample and there's no more interaction. These patients are real partners for the scientists in developing new ways of thinking about cancer prevention, detection, treatment, and survivorship. At Huntsman Cancer Institute, for example, we have a protocol called Total Cancer Care, and 90% of our patients enroll in this protocol, basically saying that they are going to be lifelong partners with Huntsman Cancer Institute throughout their cancer journey. And this means that we get to know them, we exchange results with them, and these 4 Ps, I think, are the way forward in cancer research and care.
And tagging onto that last P, partnerships, the partnership, now segueing over to Larry, and the time that we have left here, can you give us a glance of what the future is? You're the typical future patient. I'm trying to understand what it means to be a future doctor. And in the future, the doctor might be the AI, and that relationship with the patient and the doctor is the patient and the AI. Does that mean I'm out of a job? I need to understand this, but are you going to be able to see me in the future, Larry? And what does it mean to have this sense of empowerment as a patient that gives you agency to act?
Well, it's often best to look back into the recent past if you want to look into the coming future. I come to FiRe, I've been coming for so many years, it is a time of reflection. I have this FiRe shirt on. If you read carefully, it's from 2006. In 2006, I had no idea that there was anything wrong with me. I was getting healthier. I had no idea I had an incurable chronic disease of inflammatory bowel disease. It was actually 2 years later before I had the first symptom. And I started taking data. And I had exactly the same experience as Sharon with the doctors I had then. Basically, they wouldn't look at my data and wanted to know why I was doing it. Told me I shouldn't do it. And then from 2006, 5 years after that, Mark Anderson, thank you, asked me if I would write up my experience for this SNS newsletter. That was the first time I had ever put this out there. I was not intending to tell anyone. But thanks to Mark, it got out to a lot of people. And it led me to begin going much deeper into what was going on with me. By that time, I began to find this new set of doctors like Mike that understood there was a change coming and that data was going to change everything, and could they somehow partner with me. And over the time, I've developed incredibly important relationships with doctors in GI, surgery, radiology, and now, most recently, and in some ways most importantly, Mike. And this partnership is essential. I mean, yeah, I'm a scientist and I know how to do stuff, but I'm not a lifetime person who's spent time on what can go right or wrong with the human body, and that's what doctors are. So that partnership is very important. But as this continues, I'll just point out that the amount of data that I'm routinely taking on my body now is arguably at least 1 billion times what I was taking per year in 2008 when I started. And I was taking 100 things then about my blood. So we're into the big data era. And it's like, imagine your life, every moment of the life that you're on the web and everything. The massive amount of data that Amazon and Google and all the rest of them are taking, and then they're doing it on everyone, and they're doing massive amounts of computing and comparison and everything else to figure out that advertisement that's giving Google all of its income. Well, where is that? And what really is important is like our bodies and our health. That's the most important thing you've got. And if you lose your health, you know how important it is. And so I think that's where we're going, is all of the, you notice how many talks we've had here this year at FiRe on data, on artificial intelligence, on privacy, on keeping that data importantly to you and not just to be out there and being hacked and being taken advantage of. Because those are the new tools that are going to be the basis of the new medicine and the new, even better, healthy aging and healthy living. And so that's the revolution that's coming. And yes, the artificial intelligence will be critical for that. But more importantly, right now, if you look at the demographic transition that's happening most extreme in Russia, but also in Europe and Japan, and except for the miracle of immigration in this country, it would be happening to us, which is the change in the demographic pyramid, so that we're getting more and more older people per younger person. So the big challenge coming is that there are not going to be enough humans to go around for the aging population. And that's one reason Japan has put so much effort into robots that can help take care of aging people. So the one thing I see that's going to be psychologically the biggest problem, and I think Sharon, your example shows, is loneliness, of not having someone to talk to. Well, that's where the AIs, which started with Siri and then now with Alexa and Google Home and digital assistants and so forth, just imagine 5 to 10 years of exponential growth in that capability, where you're each going to have an individual AI who gets to know your body and your habits and your environment interactions and gives you advice, is your friend, advice. Is there for you. You can talk to it 24 hours a day. It never gets tired. And it knows your emotional state at any given point. Because when you're sitting here doing this all day, there's a camera looking at your face. And 10 years ago, we showed that can show your emotional state by mapping the 200 muscles in your face better than you know it. And they know it over time. They know it versus time of day. They know it versus what you're doing. That is the revolution that's coming.
There's definitely a disruption coming, and if you guys have any questions, please come up to the mic and want to ask anything. And we're going to have a breakout session explaining a little bit more about what we're trying to do with this patient group in Project Apollo later on this afternoon. But one of the things, Larry, that's interesting is like most of the data that's going to be collected about individuals is happening outside of the doctor's office. We have wearables, there's the Google Home, the Alexa, your car is going to start reporting medical data. You know, whether we like it or not, all of these things are going to start happening. And how does that play into how it interacts with their physician? How does that play into what the patient can do with that data? And is that data useful to the patient? And can they use that data to give it to researchers that might be able to make new discoveries on things? So, question.
Speaking of data, yes, it would be great to have a really smart Alexa tracking me all the time for my health and to make me feel less lonely. But I recently returned an Alexa when I heard of the court case where they had Alexa always playing in the background. So the privacy aspect of this, how do you mitigate against sharing too much and then having that used against you by an insurance company, a government, et cetera?
The only way that that's going to happen, and we've had some discussions on stage, is if we have a fundamental change in the property rights of data, which is that if you, your body, or you in any activity generate data, you have a total ownership to that data. Blockchain might be a very good way of making sure that there's an immutable ledger that knows about it. And then you have the freedom to license that, or however you want to negotiate it, with your doctor, with Amazon, with Google, with whoever. We're a long way from that. It involves deep regulatory and legal and cultural shifts. In fact, it turns the whole world upside down. Right now, you're giving all your information about your life away for free.
It's happening already.
And it's just the opposite. You should not give any of it away unless you think it's important for you. And you can set the price through a negotiation.
So
we're not there, but until we get there, this new world won't be possible.
So we're going to have at least a generation where we've all overshared and are going to have to get burned by it before the next generation.
Well, that's happening right now.
Yeah. Well,
and that's what we hear all these talks on the stage here about all the hacking and everything else. That's now.
And one, I think it's also really important to appreciate that we need more science. We need a stronger evidence base. We have now more data, but we don't understand all of it. And there is a sort of unintended consequence of people having data that they're trying to interpret without any scientific foundation.
We're out of time right now, but come to the breakout sessions if you have more questions. If you're interested in, if you're having interesting data on yourself as a patient, come talk to me. I'm happy to talk to you. If you're corporations like Aravel, we're going to start partnering with them with our patient group. Any corporate sponsorships or in philanthropic type things to help this patient group get off the ground, we're happy to discuss more. So thank you for your time, and thank you, Sharon, for your story there, and everyone on the panel.